The views expressed during this program are not necessarily those of the staff and management of Viper Broadcasting. Please limit your calls to one per hour. Live from Studio C, it's the KRMS Morning Magazine. Your phone calls are welcome at 573-302-7000 or call toll-free 1-866-372-1270. Now, here's hour number one of the KRMS Morning Magazine on News Talk 1150, KRMS, and 97.5 KRMS FM.
Off we go on another adventure into what's new, what's exciting, what's been happening. Well, I know what's been happening. We had a nice little blast of winter. And then we had the pub crawl on Saturday night. I'm laughing because my wife went out and had a very good time. She had a great time. She enjoyed herself thoroughly, and I guess she's probably done until next year. 9:11 is our time, 22 degrees now. Starting to see a few peaks of sunshine here and there, looking for a partly cloudy sky. High today of about 32 by the time it's all said and done. Also, partly cloudy tonight, low of 23. Then we get another blast of winter rolling through as far as winter weather in terms of the precipitation. We'll see some snow, possibly a rain-snow mix tomorrow. 36 the high, 31 the low again. All of this pretty much just rests on the temperature. Whatever we end up getting in terms of temperature-wise, will it be snow, will it be rain, will it be a rain-snow mix? I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. But you have been warned, so prepare accordingly. Wednesday, clouds and 44 for the high, the low 23. Partly cloudy on Thursday, high of 45, low 27. Thursday, yes. Then we get to Friday where we do have a partly cloudy sky with a high of 51, the low 38. That's what's expected. Clouds and scattered showers possible on Saturday, high of 52 and a low of 33. Again, 22 degrees. Partly cloudy sky. We are joined this morning as we are the third Monday of each month by our good friend Dan Wos, who's the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy and Good Gun, Bad Guy 2. We talk about not only events happening here locally, but, of course, things that are going on around the rest of the country, things we need to pay attention to because, well, if we're not watching, these sorts of things could creep up in our state as far as the Second Amendment, things that people in various state legislatures and also of course, what's going on in Washington, D.C., some of the things they're talking about, some of the things that they're doing. And so we welcome Dan to the program for this second time in 2019. Dan, how you doing this morning?
Hey, great, KB. Thanks for having me on your show. We want to talk about radical left-wing, anti-gun, anti-American insanity.
Yes, and there's a lot of it running around out there. And you know, what's interesting is how you can take some of the other things that these folks are talking about, and if you follow it closely enough, it comes right back around to firearms, to the Second Amendment, and to law-abiding gun owners. And I want to send a shout-out because you do such a fine job of promoting this program on your Facebook page. So to all of Dan's fans from around the country, if any of you are tuning in this morning on KRMSradio.com, good morning to you, and I hope that you folks will take the time to call us, as well as all of our local listeners. We've got a good fan base. We've got people here, Dan, at the Lake of the Ozarks, throughout the state, throughout the country. We know that a lot of people listen to KRMS, especially people who have lived here and maybe ventured off to seek a career somewhere else or have moved for whatever reason that still want to tune in and find out what's going on at the beautiful Lake of the Ozarks. So welcome to all of you followers of Dan Wos, and I thank you for taking the time to tune in here this morning, and maybe shoot us an email at krmsradio.com and let us know where you're listening. Lots to talk about, starting, I think we might have mentioned the red flag gun laws that are popping up in states. And, of course, I believe it might have been was it Maryland, somewhere up near you, where this finally came to fruition, where somebody had the police show up at their home. They came to the door with a firearm, and then they set it down, but for some strange reason went back and picked it up. And it turns out that the person that we were talking about here ended up getting killed by the police because I guess maybe they felt threatened or maybe they thought that this person was going to shoot them. But it all came around as part of the red flag gun law in that particular state, and we're certainly sorry to see something like that happen. And then again, as we've talked about plenty of times with due process and things like that being thrown right out the window.
Yeah, the one you're referring to there is in Maryland. Was in Maryland,
right.
And the guy's name was Gary Willis, and he was 61 years old, and he had some sort of conflict, disagreement, or whatever with a family member, and
right.
that family member turned him in to the cops and said that he could be a danger to himself or others. And because of the Maryland red flag law that was already in place, the cops had the authority to show up at his house, at a guy's house who he wasn't even a criminal. He didn't do anything wrong. He was never in any trouble. But because of this simple accusation, the red flag law gave the cops the authority to go to the house to confiscate his guns first, and then they would have Gary go fight to get his rights back in court and prove his innocence. But in the process, like you said, he was shot and killed in his own home, and this is a terrible result of these red flag laws. They call them extreme risk protection orders. They call them all sorts of things, but a lot of different states, I think 13 or 14 states now, are implementing them. And really, what it is a way for the states to have the authority to confiscate guns without due process, and that should scare the hell out of everybody. And now there's a federal bill that would encourage states to continue this type of behavior, and not only encourage them, but offer them grants if they support this type of if they support their own statewide red flag law. So the federal wants to encourage states to do this, so they don't have to do the dirty work. They can let the police departments do it for them.
And how nice is that? I mean, isn't it bad enough that law enforcement is already under the kind of pressure that they're under these days, with members of law enforcement being randomly targeted by whomever, and also what they would normally go through on a regular basis anyway. Now that they have this to deal with as well, and I'm just kind of curious to some degree how law enforcement feels about this, and if indeed they don't really want to have to participate in something like this, but they're not really given much of a choice.
Well, yeah, exactly. And most of these guys are good guys, and they don't want to infringe on the rights of people. They don't want to strong-arm them. And that, I know I have a lot of friends who are cops, and none of them go for any of this nonsense, which brings me to a New Mexico county that is defying that. They actually created a Second Amendment sanctuary, and this is Quay County in New Mexico, and they voted unanimously to pass the resolution. And basically, what they're saying is, no, this is a sanctuary county for gun owners. And so, we always talk about sanctuary cities, and finally, we have someone who has come to their senses and created a sanctuary for law-abiding gun owners.
Why can't it be used? Why can't it be used both ways, Dan? Why can't it? Hey, we've got a caller on the line. Let's go to the phones here. Caller, appreciate you joining us this morning on KRMS. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, gentlemen. People need to wake up. There's a new terrorist group in this country, and they're doing it legally, and they're doing it by the politicians. It's called the Democratic Party, okay?
Yes.
And people just need to understand, terrorists abroad, the 9/11 incident and everything, was just a way a plot for our government to get into everybody's business, okay? Plain and simple. But now the terrorist community becomes the Democratic Party by legally, and here's a good issue, this red flag law. I mean, there are a lot of retired military out there, a lot of veterans that fought all over the world, lost limbs, because the government says you need to go, you're a soldier, you need to go defend these people. And then they want to pass a law that has guys coming to my door or their door and saying, well, your neighbor says you get a little radical sometimes, we're taking your guns. You want them back, go to court. You know what? It ain't going to fly. Everybody I know in this area here, and I know a lot of law enforcement, they're the same way. They're not going to stand for it, So the terrorist group that's out there now, it's called the Democratic Party. And if you don't believe me, just keep watching television. You'll see here shortly, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Have a good one, KB.
Thanks for the phone call, sir. I appreciate it this morning.
You. Yeah, great points. Yep.
Great points from the caller there this morning. And let's go back to this Quake County in New Mexico. How were they able to do something like this? Because you would think, much like the caller alluded to, that there would be opposition out the yin-yang for something like this.
Well, this is a small, very small section of New Mexico. It's about 10,000 citizens who live there, and apparently the sheriff's department can do that. They can. It says the New Mexico Sheriff's Association called the laws unenforceable, and saying they would punish law-abiding citizens, and it's true. The gun laws would punish law-abiding citizens. So apparently, the sheriff's department has the ability, if they choose, to not support these Second Amendment violating laws.
Wonder if the listeners here in Camden County would enjoy something like that, or Miller County, or Morgan County, the counties we serve, creating a Second Amendment sanctuary where law-abiding gun owners are respected, and they're looked to as, law-abiding citizens that want to own firearms for whatever reason they want to own them, mainly for defense and possibly hunting or whatever other things, recreational shooting, whatever they like to do, and not have to deal with the will of the politicians in that particular state or, on the federal level as well. And speaking of the federal level, this is something that I'm really surprised we haven't heard a little bit more about as far as a sanctuary Second Amendment area. Somebody in some state or something, speaking out against this. But I'm going to talk about something that you mentioned as well here, and we can kind of start the conversation. We might have to jump in with a quick break. But Connecticut State Rep Jill Gilchrist with Senator Will Haskell introducing HB 5700, 5700, HB 5700 in that state, which would impose a 50% tax increase on ammo. Are you kidding me? And if that's not discrimination, Dan, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and let me just clarify. That's 50% on the cost of the ammo, not 50% on the existing tax. So let's say your tax is 7%. It's not going to be 10.5%. No, it's going to be 50% of the cost of the ammo. And the reason that, see, people like Jillian Gilchrist are severely confused and scared, and they don't know anything about guns. She's a real dummy when it comes to this stuff. She doesn't understand how the whole process works and how she is going to negatively affect people who need to protect themselves the most. In other words, it's poor people who can barely afford ammo now.
Absolutely.
Who will be cut right out of the mix. And it will ultimately, what it'll do is create a black market, and people, the bad guys. It won't affect the bad guys, and it won't affect rich people, but it will affect the people who probably are living in maybe not the most desirable areas of Connecticut, and could be potentially in danger and need ammo. And not only that, but what it does is it takes away the ability of people to practice. And that's an important thing. Gun owners always like to practice. We go to the range. We want to make sure we're efficient with our firearms. We want to make sure that we're doing the right thing, whether it's whether we're working on our draw or our grip or anything that we want to work on. We can't do that stuff without live ammo and actually shoot at the range. So it's going to limit that. It's going to limit the way people can practice.
9:24 is our time. Our guest is Dan Wos, the author of Good Gun, Bad Guy, Good Gun, Bad Guy 2. And if you're out there listening, you'd like to participate in the conversation, we'd like to have you on board at 573-3027,000, 877-330-1150, live at krmsradio.com. Back after the break with more of the Morning Magazine on KRMS.
The talk leader.
It's the greatest. We love it. It's number one.
The voice of the lake. News Talk KRMS.
9:28, 23 degrees, partly cloudy sky. Want to send a shout out to a gentleman I met Saturday night on the pub crawl. I don't know if he remembers me or not, but I remember him. Tim Jones, who's a volunteer firefighter down in Lebanon. I got to talk to Tim a little bit about life in general. He was up from Lebanon enjoying the party, the big Mardi Gras pub crawl with his wife and some friends. I guess they were out out on the evening, out on the town Saturday night. Dan Wos is our guest from, of course, up there in good old upstate New York. Good Gun, Bad Guy, Good Gun, Bad Guy 2, the books you want to check out. And he's probably working on Good Gun, Bad Guy 3 if it's not already done or close to done. But we're spending some time with Dan as we do the third Monday of every month to talk a little bit about the Second Amendment, talk about what's going on that law-abiding gun owners need to be paying attention to. And we went into the break talking about this HB 5700 out of the state of Connecticut, State Rep Jill Gilchrist and Senator Will Haskell. And, you touched on something very important. In this day and age, when Democrats are so concerned about making sure that we don't leave the poor out in the cold or out in the rain or out on the range without ammunition, this 50% tax increase on ammo is pretty much directed at anybody and everybody. You talk about poor people not being able to defend themselves because they can't afford the ammo. Middle-class people may have to limit the amount of ammo they buy, and maybe even to some degree, Dan, folks upper income because, they've got other things to take care of as well. We've got mouths to feed, and, we want to keep that roof over our head and our clothes on our back. Yeah,
definitely. And my big concern is the lack of ability for people to practice, like I said before, and I think that's important. But I'm not surprised that Democrats would want to do this because we talk about them trying to limit and restrict gun ownership. What they really how can I say this? I don't think they would care should there be more accidental gun discharges or accidental gun deaths. So that sort of thing doesn't affect them because that will just play right into their narrative anyway.
Yeah.
So when people don't get the opportunity to practice with their firearm, I guess there could be a potential for less skilled gun owners out there, which would play right, like I said, play right into the Democrats' hand. So this whole 50% tax is really just a dangerous thing to do, and it's just not fair to people who can't afford it. Ammo is already, pretty expensive, and this would eliminate the stocking up practice and poor people to defend themselves, I think. It's not the only thing. In Massachusetts, this is the insanity that I was talking about. It's stuff like this where these bills are introduced from people who don't know what they're talking about and don't know what they're doing. In Massachusetts, let me just real quickly, Massachusetts College of Art and Design disarmed their security, disarmed the cops on campus. And but here's the thing: they put them in Kevlar vests just in case they were attacked.
So why doesn't everybody? If that's the case, then why aren't they handing out Kevlar vests to everybody?
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I was talking to my wife about this, and she said the same thing. Yeah, okay, so the cops are protected. But the irony, the cops are protected and the kids aren't. But the irony of the whole thing is that they understand that they could be attacked, which is why the Kevlar vests are in play. Yet they're so anti-gun and so indoctrinated into this anti-gun mindset that they'll take the guns away knowing that there could potentially be an attack. This is the ideology, and this is how twisted these people are, and it really is a brainwashing of sorts.
I think if I went to that particular, and I use the air quotes, institution of higher learning, if I went there and I saw the security folks walking around in Kevlar, and then I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, the potential is maybe there for somebody to come on campus because they know it's a gun-free zone and do harm. I'm either going to, maybe ask if the university or this particular college will provide me with Kevlar, or if I need to, jump behind one of these police officers that's there on campus, if I could find one, because I'm sure they're there, but they're, they aren't, there's probably maybe one officer to every 100 students, but certainly.
Well, what are they going to do anyway? That's my question. What the heck are these cops going to do with their vests and no guns?
There's nothing they can do. It
doesn't make any sense to logical thinking people.
There's nothing they can do except, try to protect the students on campus as best they can and hope that help arrives in a pretty quick amount of time.
Yeah, and help meaning guys with guns.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well, that's, the problem is, in our society, we've let the liberal progressive ideology, the ideology of the left, to permeate our thought process on this. And good people who are otherwise logical thinking people have fallen prey to this idiotic way of thinking when it comes to guns, when it comes to many other, abortion, whatever other left-wing causes. And we allow it because we don't always push back on it. And now we're looking at our society and going, holy crap, what the hell's going on here? These people have lost their minds, and we're being subjected to it now, and some of these nut jobs are in Congress. So it's time to fight back, and we need to just speak out as often and as powerfully as we can.
9:35 is our time. Let's talk about something again on the positive side of all this. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, who signed a law allowing residents to carry without a permit.
Fantastic. Yeah. They're calling it the 14th constitutional carry state, and I think that's what they said. It was the 14th. There's a little bit of confusion as to how many constitutional carry states there are. And I talked to my friend Jan Morgan in Arkansas the other day, and the reason for that is that Arkansas is actually a constitutional carry state, but the government has been really good at covering that up, so their citizens are forced to, or at least think they're forced to, pay for these licenses. So Arkansas is a constitutional carry. So I think this is probably the 15th now constitutional carry state, which means you don't need a license to carry a handgun. And this goes back to what our founding fathers envisioned. And,
so maybe we should ask a criminal, do you have a license to carry that firearm? You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's the point, and that's the irony of the whole thing. These people push the notion that licenses and background checks do something effective, and really what they don't. They don't do anything. I was asked the other day on another show, by a caller, what are you against background checks? I said, well, no. If they were to do if they were to prove positive that they worked, but they don't. And what happens is there was a DOJ survey where they surveyed prisoners, and 90% of the prisoners in jail said that they avoided or evaded background checks. So, what does that tell you about background checks? The bad guys don't pay any attention to them, and so and then of the background checks that got denied, 95% of them initially are inaccurate. So what that means is that good people are being inaccurately denied their ability to defend themselves. So it doesn't weigh the scale in favor of self-defense of good people. It gives more leverage to criminals because they don't pay attention anyway, and they'll buy their guns on the black market. But it does limit background checks and licensing and things like that. Does limit good people.
Well, and that's the whole point. The law-abiding citizens are always the ones on the short end of the stick, and the criminals who could care less, they're going to get a gun by hook or by crook, whatever means necessary in order to obtain a firearm if they want to have a firearm for whatever reason, to rob innocent law-abiding citizens. And, you bring somebody into the fray who's got, their firearm, they've gone through all the steps necessary, and that can very easily even the score in a particular situation, depending on what that situation may be. And, I think to some degree now, Dan, we're we're seeing criminals being a little bit more hesitant about doing certain things because they're not sure whether or not somebody's going to have a firearm. And I'll tell you, I have a lot of friends that we'll go somewhere, and one of the comfortable things about being with these people is I know they're packing, and it's something that makes me breathe a lot easier sometimes. And and they're not people that I can't trust to do the right thing. And you mentioned in addition to having a firearm, the need to go out and the need to practice and the need to continue on with education, which is so very important. Talking about trying to limit the number of instances that could possibly happen in the home. If a firearm was to discharge prematurely or something along those lines, it would seem to me that the people who are educated, the people who take the time to abide by the law, are the ones, in most cases, that don't have issues with firearms. They keep their firearms in a place where they're safe, and they do what's necessary in order to make sure that no family members, I think, and let me take a step back here and say, I think it's important, if you're going to have a firearm in the home, that you educate your children on the use of firearms and get your children into firearms programs, if they have them at the school, or if they have hunting classes and various other things where youth are encouraged to participate, so that education process takes place. So you don't have a child in a home that comes across a firearm and they've been watching TV and they see, you see all these people on TV who advocate against firearms but are more than happy to take a paycheck for a movie or a TV series where they, sling the guns around like the Old West. And just truly, again, with the education process of this and getting kids involved in dealing with firearms at a young age so they understand, they're educated, and more importantly, they respect a firearm.
Yeah, well, of course I agree with that, and the gun owners that I know are very responsible, respectable people, and that's exactly the way we think about guns, and we do want to teach our kids the right way. The notion that we don't is a fabrication, and that's part of the narrative of the anti-gunners. And this is a lot of the stuff that I talk about in Good Gun, Bad Guy, is the narrative that they create, not only in the public forum, but in their own minds, and they regurgitate and they cultivate these ideas that gun owners are reckless, Wild West, recklessly endangering everybody. It's just not true. Gun owners are not like that. Gun owners are very responsible. Some of the most responsible and respectable people that I've, ever met. And to go back to one thing you said, the bad guys being more hesitant now, I think you're right. And the statistics will show us that on average, 1 in 20 people, about 5%, will have a concealed carry license. Now, in some states, that's even higher, like Alabama, some of the southern states, it's even higher. It's 11 and upwards of that percentage of the population who have concealed carry. So the reason I say this is to let the gun grabbers, the anti-gun nut jobs, and also to let the criminals know that about 1 out of 20 people in the grocery store are potentially carrying a gun. Mm-hmm. So be careful who you mess with.
Exactly. 9:42 is our time. Our guest is Dan Wos. Dan, we're going to step aside and take another quick break. Phone calls welcome at 302-7000, 877-330-1150, live at krmsradio.com.
News, weather, sports, entertainment. News Talk, KRMS.
9:46. My guest is Dan Wos, author of Good Gun, Bad Guy and Good Gun, Bad Guy 2. And Dan, we're going to come back into the program with a phone call. Caller, thanks for joining us here on KRMS. Good morning.
Good morning, KB and Dan. Welcome. I am thrilled to hear you guys talking about this. My wife and I are both concealed carry licensed and all in the state of Missouri. But a couple of years ago, I believe, Missouri decided to go with not having a concealed carry license. You can just go in, apply, and then done. Where you're not even licensed and you can carry openly as well as concealed. Is that true?
You're right. Yeah, I think Missouri is one of those states I was talking about earlier with no license requirement. KB, can you verify that?
Yes, sir. We are.
Yeah.
Well, because the one thing that scares me about that, and I don't know if other states are doing that kind of stuff. However, in Missouri, I know I went through a lot of training, and my wife and I both train religiously. We're on we have 28 acres of property, and we can shoot anywhere we want on our property. But I have a target set up where we can both practice, and we do that religiously. But we have friends of ours that have the carry a gun, never have been through the training, never been through any of the concealed carry classes, and they scare me. That they can go about and do their thing and not have any kind of concept of what danger they could be in, as well as putting the public at danger.
Well, I tell you, that's very interesting, and I just wanted to verify what the gentleman was asking about, Dan. Constitutional carry, now law of the land in Missouri on January 1st. We became the 11th state. Now, this has been a while. We became the 11th state in the country to pass constitutional carry, which allows residents to carry concealed firearm without advanced training, law enforcement background checks, or a permit. And this is a story from 2017. That went into effect on the 1st of January 2017. So, yes, sir, this is a constitutional carry state.
Yep.
Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to address your comment about not being trained, and I think what this comes down to is more healthy understanding, healthy respect of firearms and usage, and I've always been a big proponent of firearms training in schools, and I can't remember where it is right now, but there was a school that has competition, air gun competitions and things like that. So they're starting to bring some of that back in some areas, but that's a very important piece. When I grew up as a kid, my father took me out, showed me how to use guns. We practiced. But what happens is I think the narrative on the left is scaring so many people, and they're pulling it out of schools, and they're pulling it out of the public forum, and they're making it. They're demonizing gun ownership, which is really making the problem worse. Like we talked about, like your caller just talked about. Sorry, I forgot your name, but
my name is Joe.
Joe, like you were saying, is Joe, that they are pulling that out and they're making it a bad thing. So you're right. They're eliminating the training. They're squashing the practice. They're restricting good people, and they're doing everything they can to make the problem much worse. So I agree with you 100%. Now, let me just a little statistic here. My good friends Cheryl and Danny Todd over at Gun Freedom Radio, Orlando, Florida, in 1966, the city of Orlando responded to a wave of sexual assaults by offering firearms training classes to women. Rapes dropped by nearly 90% the following year. So when the states and can get behind training and encourage it as a healthy American tradition, it's a good thing. When they don't, it makes the problem much worse.
Yep, I agree with you. So thank you.
Thank you for the phone call. Appreciate you listening this morning. Make sure and tell your friends. And again, just a reminder, Dan is on the program with us. We normally do the third Monday of the week. So again, Dan does a great job of helping to promote this, and I thank all the folks that are listening that are friends of Dan's around the country and folks that are listening here locally. And look for Dan Wos, DANWOS, capital WOS on Facebook. And you can follow along with Dan. And are you going to be out doing some more speaking engagements this year? I would imagine, we've seen plenty of those things on your Facebook page in the past. And are you planning on doing a lot of that in 2019 as well?
Yeah, I plan on going. I'll be in Phoenix doing the Gun Rights Policy Conference, and there's plenty of other things. I'll be down south in Arkansas, probably, hopefully Alabama, get down that way, and so plenty of things. Chicago, and I'll be all over this summer. Lots of radio too. I do lots of radio across the country as well. And,
you appreciate that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate, and that's another thing, KB, let me just say, I really appreciate you for doing what you're doing, bringing me on and talking to your people, your listeners about this stuff, because it's important. You're doing a great thing.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure. So I was reading here. I've read here. I guess I just kind of stumbled across something about people who are talking about repealing the Second Amendment as far as the Constitution is concerned. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, says it will never happen. There was a retired Supreme Court Justice, John Paul Stevens, who has called for the repeal of the Second Amendment on the U.S. Constitution. And he says it's the right to bear arms, saying it would make our school children safer and honor the memories of victims of recent gun violence. Apparently, it says here in a comment piece in the New York Times, a 97-year-old argued that the amendment had been warped by gun lobbying groups such as the NRA to extend beyond its original intent. He pointed out that the amendment was adopted out of concern that a national standing army might pose a threat to the security of the separate states, and we've heard that before. And then I also read another interesting article on AR-15s not being covered under the Second Amendment. So with the time we have left, maybe we can discuss those 2 points, and if anybody would like to chime in, feel free to do it before we wrap up the hour.
Well, this is part of the overall indoctrination of people on the left. They're taught to believe that guns are dangerous and the Second Amendment is bad, and gun owners are reckless. And it's just it's a very difficult thing that we have to fight against, because it's a brainwashing, like I said before, of constant propaganda, constant fear tactics, and it's not being used against us gun owners. It's being used against the voters on the left. That's the intent: is scare the hell out of as many people as possible, keep pushing the propaganda so they jump on board and vote for the politicians that promise to protect them.
Right.
And so it's a twisted game they play. What I talk about in my books is all this stuff and how to understand it, how to recognize it, and how we're going to defeat it.
We do have a caller on the line. Caller, thanks for joining us here on KRMS. Good morning.
KB, if that gay colored kid in Chicago would have had a pistol, then white supremacists wouldn't have been able to do all that bad stuff to him.
Well, I think and thank you for your phone call, but I think that is turning into something completely and totally different than he had originally. You're talking about Jussie Smollett, that the guy is apparently now facing additional questioning, and the authorities are kind of trying to figure out whether or not this thing was a hoax. And quite honestly, I was surprised to see this, that Al Sharpton is calling for Jussie Smollett, to face accountability to the maximum if he staged a hoax, if this was staged. And some people are saying it was, because first apparently it was two white guys in MAGA hats, and then it turned out that it was two Nigerian gentlemen, one of which apparently worked with him on the set of the show he was on, but that's a topic for another time. But again, going back to what you were saying about people, and that's the whole thing, we're teaching this revisionist history in this day and age, and I think one of the things that they're really focusing on is the Second Amendment and how it's not necessary, how we don't need to live in a country where law-abiding citizens need to have firearms, need to be able to protect themselves, because that just wouldn't be smart, and certainly it encourages people to go into gun-free zones and shoot up schools and kill innocent women and children, and so again, pretty much playing on the fear, and that's what this is really all about, is the fear of people who own firearms and the potential problems they could cause, if at all.
Well, that's just it. And I talk a lot about the difference between the liberal mindset and the conservative mindset. And the liberal progressive people on the left, they gravitate toward this sort of thing because they want government control. They want laws and restrictions because, to them, they like that controlled environment, that controlled society, that utopian kind of view of the world, because it feels safe to them. The thought of it feels safe. These are people who don't want to take responsibility for themselves. Conservatives, on the other hand, they say, basically, get out of my way and let me live my life and don't tell me what to do, where to go, how to do it, or what to think. And conservatives want freedom, and we want the ability to protect our own families. We don't want to rely on the cops or government. Government's supposed to work for us, and liberals forget that, and they've been conditioned, and they're their minds are constantly cultivated to believe this stuff. Conservatives reject it. We reject it 100%. So that's the difference. I think it's a difference between living in a controlled environment. They have the Democrats have their audience. They know how to target them and get them to support gun restrictions. Between having, living in that controlled environment or having freedom. That's the difference. And that's why we have such a battle, because we see things completely different.
Dan, as always, a complete pleasure having you on the program. Thanks to the callers who tuned in and joined us as well. And we'll talk to you again in the month of March.
Thanks so much, brother. Talk to you soon.
Absolutely. 9:57. We'll take a quick break. This should take us up to the top of the hour. CBS and local news on the way from News Talk KRMS.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, click that subscribe button down below and also the notification bell to keep updated on all my radio interviews, TV interviews, and the Dan Wos Destroys, where I analyze and tear apart the anti-gun media narrative. My books can be found at goodgunbadguy.net or goodgunbadguy.com. And don't forget, your Second Amendment, it's not a privilege, it's your right.